we create our Venerable Robina Courtin. This is the second of 3 summer monthly gatherings co-sponsored with the Shantideva Center. Venerable Robina Courtin has worked full-time for Lama Thupten Yeshe and Lama Zoba Rinpoche's organization, the FPMT, since her ordination in the late 1970s. Over the years, she has served as editorial director of Wisdom Publications, editors of Mandala Magazine, executive director of Liberation Prison Project, and a teacher of Buddhism. Venerable Robina is known for her straightforward and energetic teaching style, helping people discover the potential of their own minds with clear explanation about Tibetan Buddhism and how to apply it to their lives. With this, I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight, and I will hand it over to Venerable Robina. Thank you. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Okay. Everybody as well. There we go. All right. So the Lamas always tell us to set our motivations, start your activity with a pure motivation. So I suppose we might say, state your purpose, which is really what it means. So what we think, why are we sitting here? So it's, to listen, and I mean, it includes me, to these words coming from the Tibetan ripens, Tibetan knowledge holders, right back to Guru Rinpoche, who carried the knowledge directly in his mind from India, and then right back to Lord Buddha, So it's kind of this lineage of experiential teachings. About what? About the human mind and its marvelous potential. That's one way of putting it, actually. Which I think in our culture is especially powerful because we have such a hopeless idea of who we think we are and not much potential at all, certainly in terms of human qualities. So anyway, we're going to listen to these teachings so we can develop our own amazing potential for our sake, and then because we live in this crazy planet together with others, for the sake of others as well. We're all in the same boat, So thinking like that, and I was going to sing the prayer, but I'll sing the prayer, whatever, in Tibetan. If you know it, join in. But it means that. Except the first 2 lines, they're reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and the second 2 lines are stating our purpose, this altruistic motivation. Sangye charang choke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye charang choke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok Sangye charang soke chognam la jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chernyen gi personam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok. Okay. I think sometimes for us modern people, we usually mean Western people, usually mean like that, karma is this kind of weird, wacky idea made up by the hippies in the 60s, and we don't give it much credibility at all. It's kind of weird. I mean, if we're philosophical materialists, kind of like bad enough having a creator that we're so cynical about, but karma is just another kind of ridiculous idea made up by somebody, So what is karma? I mean, of course, if you read the very traditional Tibetan texts, in the first presentation of the teachings, if you hear it for the first time, because that view has been around India and the Asia for 3,000 years, they don't have to go out of their way to explain it. They just they don't have to go to way to kind of justify it, to explain it at the most basic level. But I think we need to do that. It's extremely important, I know when I first heard the teachings, in the mid-70s from Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa, I mean, I didn't understand much what he was saying. It was so arcane, because Tibetans came straight from the 14th century untouched, really. But I remember the idea of karma, I didn't understand it very well, but I really felt that would be missing in my life. I really liked it, So what is it? Okay, well, I mean, the word karma is a shorthand for this law of cause and effect. So then we go, oh, well, we understand the law of cause and effect. We're scientists, it's true. We are geniuses at learning and knowing the laws of cause and effect for the material world, that's for sure. No doubt about that. Well, this for the Buddha, one way of framing this law of cause and effect is in terms of happiness and suffering. In fact, one way of framing, the whole path actually is in terms of how to stop suffering and how to get happy. It's really a valid way to put it. So then this law of karma, as far as Buddha is concerned, this is a crucial point. I always have to state it and make extra points here because it's crucial we get it, because we misunderstand it. We just hear it as an alternative method of punishment and reward, But in Buddhism, because this is a crucial point, because there's no such concept as a creator, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, the law of karma is like self-creation. So this is one of the radical differences, I think, between the Buddhist philosophical spiritual teachings as opposed to the Christian ones or the Muslim ones. They both posit a creator. And that for me, I think, usually is the default assumption we have that makes something spiritual. Oh, I see, you believe in a creator. Not for the Buddhists. This is a huge difference. Massive difference. Just as an idea. And then when you dig deep into the philosophical approach of how it works, So this is where the law of karma comes in. As far as the Buddha is concerned, we touched on this a month ago when we talked about the mind. But basically, as Buddha's saying, and this is again the point, because Buddha's not a creator, and I always quote this, and I probably said it a month ago as well, then the assumption we have is that because it's religious teachings, it came from on high. It's revelation. That's the usual view of religious teachings, isn't it? Because it's a creator. So I always quote this, but I remember in New Zealand years ago, in Nelson actually, a little town called Nelson. I remember Courtin Senchab Rinpoche, some of you might know him. He was asked years ago, where's the best place on the planet to meditate? He said, Nelson, New Zealand. I'm sure they're very proud of it. Anyway, there's a centre there, and I was there. And this fellow asked the question, and it's the first and the last time I've ever had this question from anybody, which is quite extraordinary. He happens to be a scientist. He said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? So I said, would you ask Einstein who revealed the teachings of relativity to him? Of course, everyone laughed, because we know that a scientist is a person who uses his own noggin, who uses his brain, who uses his mind, his powers of observation, observes it very deeply, comes up with various rules, codifies them, and then presents his findings. Well, that is the Buddha. It's not meant to be funny, but you don't read that in medieval Tibetan Buddhist texts, because they don't talk like that. But that's exactly the point, which is surprising to us, because we assume, obviously, religion, you can't prove it, So the Buddhist teachings then are coming from this person, labeled Buddha, Mr. Buddha, this Indian who was first a Hindu, went as far as he could go in that genius system before him. As His Holiness said, there was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And these genius Indians were the ones who created, who investigated the mind by using this brilliant technique that they came up with. That's a brilliant psychological skill known as single-pointed concentration, shamatha. The technique, or generally samadhi, concentration. So here, of course, as soon as we hear this, we're recognizing that the Buddha is asserting the mind is a much subtler thing than we think of in the materialist world. He's not, in fact, when we talk about the mind, because this law of karma runs in the minds of the world. All minds run within the law of karma. The law of karma runs all minds. In fact, the term in Tibetan that we translate in English as sentient being, sem chen, is mind possessor. I think it's so delicious. It's much nicer. So for the Buddha, there are trillions of minds, mind possessors. And all of those minds are driven by the law of karma, are kind of run by the law of karma. And all minds, one, are not physical. Two, are not the brain, not a function of the brain. Two, are not the handiwork of a creator or mummy and daddy. And three, have far more subtle levels of cognition. You've got to state this in the beginning, because the way that Buddhism would talk about, mind, the law of karma coming from past lives, going to future lives, blah, blah, it's all nonsense unless we at least take this hypothesis that your consciousness did not begin in your mother's womb. It does not come from a creator or mummy and daddy, and is not a function of the brain. And it can't come from nothing. It's a continuity of mental moments, basically. They use the term mental continuum. So these consciousnesses, all these countless sem-gens, and humans and animals, the ones that we can see on this planet, are a tiny percentage as far as the Buddhist view is concerned. There are countless other sentient beings, mind possessors, experiencing other mental states in variations of intense suffering to intense joy. This is what Buddha means by being in samsara, like, you know, these different types of rebirths. So all these minds are beginningless and endless, which is the nuttiest view we have ever heard. One of our strongest, most powerful questions is, where did it begin? Where did my suffering begin? Where did this begin? Where did karma begin? When did the world begin? I mean, it's a huge question. You know, but as His Holiness said one time, and when he has many conversations with all the scientists, but, you know, about the Big Bang, he said, no problem, just not the first Big Bang, that's all. Because the Buddhist view is that the universe consists of matter and minds, basically, and mind being not physical, much more subtle levels of cognition, not the handiwork of mummy daddy, not the function of the brain, and not coming from nothing. So it's a beginningless continuity of mental moments that's driven by this law of karma. In the same way you describe a garden, we don't say it like this, but we can hear it, that a garden is run by the law of botany. I mean, the law of botany is not some kind of person up there who pulls the strings. It's just the label we give to the law that we have observed that gardens, you know, that define gardens. That's all. So it's not made up by anybody. This view of karma is not from revelation. There's no view. I mean, there is view like that insofar as the Buddhas can be powerful beings who can reveal, you know, if you in your meditation you can have a vision of the Buddha, then that's kind of like revelation. But the concept here is hugely important point about this concept of as opposed to God's law, which is a massive one in the religious philosophies. There's no such equivalent, not for the natural negativities. There are Buddha's rules. When Buddha's students start getting together, you know, start living together like all people, he started making rules, you know, well, don't do this and wash the dishes. I mean, get my point. You know, when you live together, you be nice, and, or if you're going for your begging and you have your bowl, you know, and you're not supposed to ask for anything, you're supposed to take what you're given, and you prefer your veggies to the rice, so you snuck your veggies under the rice, hoping for more veggies. There's a rule that says you shouldn't do that. That's not a natural negativity. That's kind of a Buddha-made rule. There's lots of those. But the fundamental things that are known as natural, for the Buddha, are known as natural law. Like, no one wants to suffer. So from that perspective, therefore, killing is a natural law. And this is, getting to the view of karma, this is a massive point to really be clear about. Because when we hear the Buddha says don't kill, it just sounds like Jesus, you know? And if you do kill, God's going to punish you, because that's the view. If there is a boss called a creator, I'm not being rude, it's a natural consequence. God is the boss. So God will punish or reward. The general approach is how we think of religious philosophy. There's no concept like that in Buddhism because there's no creator. Therefore, there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. It's a huge point to make, because we hear it as if it's the same. It is in the same insofar as Buddha's got a little checklist of 10 don'ts as well as Jesus, you know, and even very similar. Don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner. Very similar, right? But the crucial difference is the reason why. So if you ask Jesus, why shouldn't I kill? And you should ask, he will tell you very clearly, because God said. And that is interesting. I always quote this. That my Jesuit priest friend, I was having a discussion. I said, what is it that defines something as a sin, as a negative action? He said, what defines it as wrong is that God said not to do it, which is reasonable if God is the boss. If there's such a being as a creator, then it's totally appropriate. You do God's will. Perfect. But that's not the Buddha's view. Like we all know, they say in the teachings, Buddha says, don't just believe what I'm telling you, check it like you would gold or whatever you want to check. Because he's not a creator. He's not a creator. Therefore, he's not a punisher and he's not a rewarder. There is no concept like that. Buddha would suggest we've made that up. Buddhism has very, you know, the concept, especially the Mahayana Buddhist teachings, would describe a Buddha of 3 essential qualities, just like God. Infinite wisdom, infinite power, infinite compassion. But the difference is the Christians say that they have also got the job of being a creator, the source of the universe. There's no view like that, no view like that. In fact, I think the Catholics, or maybe all the Christians, extensively go into this concept of there can be a first cause, capital F, capital C, and that's what they mean by God. Buddha says it's not viable. So then the only conclusion for the Buddha's view, and this is his observation, because the mind has this potential, it's a beginningless continuity of mental moments driven by this law of karma. So what that means very simply is that every millisecond of what we think and do and say, every sentient being, every monkey, every ant, every dog, every psychopath, every saint, by definition, every single tiny thing that we think and do and say is the process that produces this oneself. It's a really simple way of putting it. The law of cause and effect. So we get that brilliantly when it comes to turning yourself into a musician, turning yourself into a carpenter, turning yourself into a cook. You know perfectly well every tiny thing you think and do and say in relation to music is what produces the musician. We don't say it like that, and we certainly don't call it karma, but that's the meaning. It's not religious. It's just a term they use. I don't even know what the word means. I think it means action or something. So it's a natural process that occurs in minds. Minds create karma. Minds create a musician. So you know it's an ongoing process. You've got to think a certain way, learn the theories, and then you play the piano a certain way, and you practice and practice, and you literally transform yourself from a non-musician to a musician. Well, Buddha says that's exactly the same with turning yourself from a miserable, hopeless, neurotic, ridiculous person into a marvelous, developed, fully grown person, which he would label a Buddha. In other words, we accept that we turn ourselves into the carpenter or the musician, but we don't accept that we turn ourselves into a happy person or a suffering person. Isn't it fascinating? We think everything else does that. If we have the same way that we think about what causes me happiness, which is that the husband, the child, the weather, the event, the money in the bank, all the external world are the main causes of my happiness. And look at our lives. It's logical we assume that. Our behavior tells us that we think that. And when bad things happen, we totally blame the outside for things going wrong, and they do play a role. But the Buddha would say that what goes on in your mind is the main player. So that view, which we know when it comes to music. So in other words, if you're a lousy musician, you could blame Mr. Steinway for making a bad piano, and you could blame Mr. Bach for writing bad music, and you could blame your teacher for not teaching you properly, but you really do know that it was because you didn't practice. We kind of know that. But when it comes to happiness and suffering, we don't have any view that we play a role in our happiness and suffering. I mean, we'll say, well, excuse me, we do. Yeah, because we've thought about it. But if you don't think about it, if we're not conscious, if we're not aware, the default view, and this is what Buddha means by being in samsara, the default view, like we talked a month ago, is being driven by attachment, driven by anger, driven by depression, driven by ego grasping. The view of those states of mind are that I'm an innocent victim, I didn't ask to get born, and it's not my fault. We have to observe that, we can see that. I remember one time Lama Rinpoche said, and initially it sounds quite shocking, that the vast majority of all humans, including all the smarty pants. Do we say smarty pants in America? We do, okay. It'll be smarty pants, smarty pants. So including all the smarty pants, the vast majority of humans on this planet this is what he said, have no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their life. What that means is, and this is exactly what Buddha means by being in samsara, that because of attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, and the rest, ego, all the voices of ego, we are totally addicted to believing that everything out there is where happiness is and where suffering is. So we can see we spend and it's not that we think this is moralistic, this is just the way samsara is. It should break our hearts when we see we do this. We're all driven by this. Because look at it, from the second you wake up in the morning until the second you go to sleep, where is all your attention? It's obvious, it's outside world. And it needs to be, because you'll crash the car if you don't, or you bump into people. But we don't pay attention to the mind at all until something goes crazy, So we assume happiness is out there, we have to search for it. And we assume suffering is out there, we have to try and avoid it. And surely this is a way of defining all of our lives. So all Buddha's saying is, honey child, petals, I'm sorry, you're missing the main thing. You better start learning about what goes on in your own mind. And I think these days, especially since Mr. Freud, and all the psychotherapy and things, we're really beginning to get a little bit of this in the West. It's really clear in the modern world. But Buddha's, this is his expertise, And the level of clarity and brilliance, and this is very surprising to us, that we can cultivate in this job of being aware of our mind, using these brilliant techniques these Indians invented 3,000 years ago, are way beyond what we could imagine, And in the long term pursuit of this marvelous development of this marvelous potential we've got, this is what we need to cultivate that. So, okay, this law of karma plays out in the mind. The mind is the main thing. In fact, the word intention, which is like volition, I will, that's the actual meaning of the word karma, the real direct meaning, mental action, something like that. It starts with the mind. As Lama Zopa says, a saying in Tibetan, everything exists on the tip of the wish, the thought, may I will. You know perfectly well, the main cause of getting an ice cream is the first thing is, I want an ice cream. Your legs won't take you there, I promise, without the thought. It's so obvious somehow, but we don't notice 99% of our intentions because we're driven by the habit of attachment and anger and jealousy but attentions, you know. So we've got to become super familiar with our mind. And the thing is about this law of karma, often we do hear it as some kind of this heavy duty kind of series of dreadful punishments, you know. And then somehow we're a victim of it, this law of karma. But law of botany, it doesn't need you to decide to do it or not do it. Gardens will grow no matter what. But you can learn the law of botany, can't you, to use it to your advantage. And that's the approach to being a Buddhist. And this is surprising for some, because I'm not being rude, but many Buddhists and many Buddhist cultures don't talk about karma. It's okay, but Tibetan Buddhists do. So, and I love it. Because the view of karma, you know, it's the equivalent of the view we have in the modern and the philosophical materialist world that looks in detail into our mummy and daddy to discover who we are. We look into the genes, the DNA, look at their behavior, look at all their states of mind, and that is the way we decide who we are and how we came into this life and who we are now, all based mainly on them and then others since then, what they have done to us. That is our view. It's really quite sophisticated. We've developed it to sophisticated degrees, haven't we, of trying to work out how a person is, what they are. We look first at the mummy, daddy, genes, DNA, chemicals, and then the events, the Catholic nuns, the past husband, the children, all the things that have happened to us in our life. Now, Buddha's not arguing for 1 minute that they don't play a role. He just says they're not main player. They're not the main player, and that's pretty shocking to us. So it takes a while to hear that. Okay, so the general principle of karma is that everything you think and do and say, none of that sows a seed in your mind. It's the analogy he uses all the time, seed and fruits. But I think he'd like the concept programs your mind. It's a really good, we like that. That's a good quality. That's a good statement. Every millisecond of what you think and do and say, nothing goes astray, programs you into what you become. So of course with music, we're very precise, we're very clear. There's a series of practices, there are a series of techniques that you know you must follow in order, and you practice and practice very coherently, and you will produce a musician. But with happiness and suffering, because we think it's the outside world, we try so hard to get the nice things, the nice boyfriend, the nice cake, the nice fridge. Then they break, or he leaves us, or he dies. You know, we all know things are so volatile, nothing seems to work. So the law that we think is the law of happiness, to get what you want and able suffering, doesn't seem to work, but we keep trying. The Buddha's view is that the main cause of our happiness and suffering is very precise. The main cause of our happiness and suffering, second by second, is within oneself. So this is in the Four Noble Truths, the very first teaching the Buddha gave. The four truths for the noble ones, actually. I don't think the truths are noble. It's the noble ones, a term for someone who's realized all this. These four facts, and I prefer the word fact. The four facts of life for the noble ones. So Buddha, this is his first teaching he gave, and he framed all of this in terms of suffering, which is why it always sounds so depressing, you know. So the first one is there is suffering. And he mentions 3 levels of it. The first one is what we all know, and he calls it the suffering of suffering. That's in your face suffering. That's when the bad things happen. That's the only one we think about. That's the first one. But he's got these 2 subtler, more nuanced levels of suffering, which don't even make sense to us. You know, the second one, we mightn't go into these, we'll see what happens. The second one is called the suffering of change, and that shockingly enough refers to what we mean by happiness. So the first one is when the bad things happen, and the second one is when the good things happen. For Buddha, that's a more nuanced level of suffering. And there's real logic to it, but one has to think about it very carefully. Whether that comes today, I'm not sure, we'll see. The third one is even more subtle, more abstract. All pervasive suffering. But we won't go there now. We'll just stick to the first kind. Now, the second noble truth is, guess what, folks? There are causes of suffering. The third one is, you know what? You can get rid of the causes of suffering and suffering. And the fourth one is how to do it, the methodology. That's encouraging. Now, the shocking part is the second noble truth. Buddha articulates two main causes of suffering. Now, just in general, as we understand cause and effect, we know very well, just to produce anything, the simplest thing, there have to be the gathering together of hundreds, if not thousands, of causes. It's pretty clear. If you had to articulate every tiny thing that has to come together to produce a computer, you're going to have, a volume. The simplest thing, even a cake, many different things have to come together, a flower, everything. And this is a vital teaching in Buddhism that sort of seems self-evident about dependent arising and how things are made of parts and so on and so forth. And it becomes a crucial point as we progress on the path in order to really understand the nature of things. So here, what Buddha is describing is there are causes of suffering, and not just generalized suffering, but he's meaning very precisely each moment of suffering. A moment of suffering has a bunch of causes. And equally, you can flip it over, a moment of happiness has causes, which is fairly evident. We all know things have causes. And we also know happiness and suffering have causes. But his major point, and this is the shock, there are many, as we would say, even with a rose, there are many causes that are secondary causes, like the earth, the water, the warmth. They're crucial causes. But you know you'll never get a rose until you have a rose seed. Now, equally, you can have a rose seed and hold it in the sky for 27 years. You won't get a rose because you need the secondary causes. So things have to come together. Many causes and conditions have to all come together in the right time to produce a rose, a computer, a moment of suffering, a moment of happiness. The same logic that we think about in scientific terms for physical things, Buddha uses that same clarity and precision when it comes to happiness and suffering. But the shocking part is, there are the external causes. There's my boyfriend who just punched me in the nose, and you're the witness, he did it. He's a very major cause, but crucially for Buddha, honey child, he says to me, Robina, he's not the main cause, I'm very sorry. He's merely a catalyst. He's merely a secondary cause. He's like the earth and the water and the warmth. So what's the main cause? Well, I'm sorry to tell you, Robina, baby, it's your past action called karma and your delusion that drove that action. They are the two main causes of suffering. Past action driven by a delusion. So we discussed mind a month ago, I think, and we looked at them. If we remind us, the view of the mind in Buddhism, the view, the contents of our mind, all our thousands of states of mind, our thoughts and feelings and emotions can be divided very simply into the neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, rubbish ones, anger, attachment, jealousy, blah, blah. Delusions is a really good word they use. Second, the virtues, the positive qualities, they're our saving grace. They're the two main things. The first lot, the delusions, for the Buddha, of these two, karma and delusions, they subsume to one, and it's the delusions. So the mind, specifically the deluded parts of our mind, are the main cause of all suffering. So of course it sounds ridiculous, but one has to unpack it if one is interested. So the two main causes of suffering from that boyfriend point of view, now let's flip it over and call about happiness. Because we never think of karma in terms of happiness. We tend to take for granted. We don't care why good things happen. Just keep making it happen, please. But when a bad thing happens, we have a mental breakdown, Why do bad things happen to me? I've never yet had a person who says, why do good things happen to me? We take it for granted. And that's a really powerful point. We can discuss that. So let's discuss happiness, because it's exactly the same logic. I mean, flowers and weeds both come from seeds. So the same logic here. So if my boyfriend gives me a gift, I'm short of money for the Uber, and he gives me $100 or something, you know. Oh, no, it wouldn't be that, it'd be a credit card, wouldn't it? Never mind, get my point. So I go, oh, isn't he kind? And he is being kind. So that would trigger a moment of happiness, wouldn't it? Just a moment of pleasure in the mind. How delightful. And it's clear, why are you happy, Robina? Oh, my boyfriend was so kind to me. I mean, it's just logical we'd say that. It's logical we'd say that. Now, let's say you eat a piece of cake that makes you vomit. Why are you vomiting, Robina? Why are you suffering? The cake made me vomit. No one's going to argue. But the Buddha has a subtler analysis. And in both cases, the main cause of the kindness of that boyfriend is my past karma of past generosity. We're going to go into detail here. And this is a coherent and logical thing for the Buddha. In this, like I said, this precision and clarity and analysis that we know you need to get to put together a computer is the same level of clarity and precision analysis the Buddha would in the presenting of this law, and indeed in our application of it. But of course, it's such a big surprise for us because we think most of life's just good luck and bad luck. It's a bizarre idea for the Buddha. Can't be such a thing. Nothing's random. Everything has causes, and they can be known. So the main cause of that moment of happiness is a past action of virtue in my mind that left a seed in my mind of an action that's similar, of let's say generosity, that is in my mind, and now meeting the condition called boyfriend, I just experienced the fruit of that action. Simple way of putting it. So all the experiences of happiness, every moment, as many as you have even today, you know, you can count moments when something pleasant happened, a nice feeling arose, let's say. Each one of those moments is the fruit of a past virtue that you did, that sowed a seed in your mind that is this beginningless continuity of mental moments out of which nothing goes astray. And then you meet the external condition, like the seed is in the ground and the rain comes, the rose seed pops up. It's like that. This is the Buddha's view. This is the teachings. It's been the Hindus before this. It's been around for 3,000 years, this view. Hippies didn't make it up. And I just find it I just love it. I love that kind of, I just like the view of karma. I just find it very powerful. For me, the main thing about this is the biggest one. The more we see how we feel, the way Buddha talks about ego, and it's with respect to our views, it's reinforced by our philosophical views. I really did not ask to get born. We say it like a joke, but it's deadly serious. I didn't. And these two wacky people, my mum and dad, I mean, they're not wacky, I'm just talking. They're dear, dying, kind people, hopped into bed and I popped out and they did. I mean, it's sort of like, it's kind of bit, I just find it a bit schizophrenic. Don't laugh at me. I mean, you can laugh at me. Do laugh at me. People laugh at me, apparently. I always quote this. This is English. Anybody heard of Ronnie Corbett, the two Ronnies? No, you haven't. There's an English comedian. He's hilariously funny. The number of people in England when I lived there who thought I was Ronnie Corbett. This little perky little fellow with glasses. I mean, there must be some similarity. I don't know what. Anyway, the number of people who think I was Ronnie Corbett, it's very funny. Never mind. So, okay. So now I forget what I was saying. Basically every millisecond of what we experience moment by moment, and that level of precision of moment by moment is what really comes as you learn to know your mind. You get to see your mind ever more subtly, ever more subtly, ever more subtly, and you can identify moment by moment by moment. I mean, I really mean it when I say the level of clarity and precision. But we know you need to be a good scientist, a good cook even, is exactly what we need to employ to do the job of unpacking and unraveling our mind and learning the way the mind works and learning this law of karma that runs my life so we can be in charge of it and turn ourselves into this marvelous person the Buddha says we've all got the potential to become, you know. So every millisecond of our experiences, and this is what's fascinating, if you think about it, I think it's true. In the way he talks about the mind, there's a particular state of mind called feeling, and it's used very precisely. I think sometimes it's translated as sensation. And there's only three kinds. Those that are pleasant, what we'd call happy, even if you're fortunate enough, rapture and ecstasy, that's like levels of happy feelings. They're one type of feeling, a happy feeling, a pleasant feeling. They are the fruit, each one of those, each moment of those is the fruit of one karmic seed of past virtue that is then in your mind stream and is then meets the external conditions and is triggered and ripens as a happy feeling. That's the way they talk about it. Then there are the unhappy feelings, unpleasant feelings, all the way to the most intense, unbelievable pain and agony. The third lot are called neutral. Don't worry about them. So really, it's true. We can look into our lives in terms of happiness and suffering. And if we think about it, that's exactly how we live our lives. We're wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Maybe we just don't join the dots, you know, but this is exactly the way Buddha frames his teachings and frames the law of karma. Because one way of talking, as I said, the whole Buddha's view is in terms of getting rid of suffering and getting happiness. And Buddha happens to say that all minds have the natural potential to be utterly free of suffering and its causes. That's the meaning of the word nirvana. And what you would have, what is left if you've gotten rid of suffering and its causes, which means all the delusions and all the negative karma, what is left is your mind radiant, blissful, clear, joyful, and virtuous, happy, kind, compassionate, generous, loving. They are our natural state for the Buddha. So, of course, like all seeds, they don't ripen overnight. You know, if you want to get rich, you don't start being generous now and hope it'll come tomorrow and you win the lottery. No, maybe next life you've got to wait for the lottery to get, you know. But I mean, every moment of whatever, I mean, this is the most simple level. Don't think it was just religious. Any moment of ordinary happiness, like, you know, walking into Starbucks and they have the cake you want. I mean, this sounds like hilarious. But if you look at the majority of the world, don't get anything they want. Even having ability to walk into a cafe and have the dollar in your bag, or the $5 or $10 now, to get the one cake, it's like we just take it for granted. This is the fruit of generosity, people. It's unbelievable. Every tiny thing that we have that causes a happy feeling, that makes life, when life is easy, when people are kind to you, when the bus comes on time, when the bank gives you credit, things we take for granted, or that we think kind of, you know, come from the outside world, or that we think, well, I deserve. But if you haven't created the causes, Buddha says, I'm sorry, as much as you think you deserve, it won't come. So the whole approach to karma, the more we see, the more we look inside and see the way ego works, the way Buddhism describes, it's self-pity. I'm not being mean. It sounds heavy. Lama Yeshe would say, you guys, you know, with all your, he called ego self-pity me, which sounds kind of shocking, especially if the suffering is so terrible. But have a look at the ordinary way we feel, the hopeless, when we're feeling hopeless, when things go wrong, when the hubby's not nice, when the job is bad, when the boss is mean, ordinary things. There's a feeling of hopeless, there's a feeling of victim, isn't it? That somehow stuff is done to us, that we're overwhelmed by it. We don't deserve it. It's a very powerful way that we suffer. Got to unpack that, look at that. That's how it feels. So what I've found, trying to do my best to use these views, you know, that I'm talking about, because I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is, that since I first heard about the view of karma, it takes time, it's huge, it's so different from our normal view, and then learning to use that as my basis for interpreting my life, then what it really does what you learn to do is you learn to become less victim, more accountable, more brave, more courageous, because whatever happens, and you're trying to use the law of karma to describe it and apply it to yourself, because that's what you're trying to do if you're practicing. I mean, you're trying to practice music, you try to follow Bach's music. We're trying to follow Buddha's music here, because I've decided this is my working hypothesis. No one's forcing me. So the more I use the view of karma, when good things happen and bad, then you take responsibility for it. You own it. It's not coming from the outside. It is, but you own that you caused it to be there. It's really quite powerful, but that takes time, and it really is hard to apply, because the view of the feeling of hopeless, not fair, it's not my fault, and things out there being very concrete, having nothing to do with me, is very real, you know. So that's just a general approach, a general kind of overview of karma, the way it kind of, how to understand it psychologically, you know. So let's look at some details. How are we going for time? What is the clock here? There's no clock on here. Yes, it's 7:50, 6:30, 45. Okay, we've got fine. So I think I'll go into details, and then I think I'll go into the details. Just very brief, but the 4 ways that karma ripens. Then I think we have a bit of kind of meat on the bones. I mean, there's something to discuss perhaps. So the 4 ways of karma, one way of looking at your life is in terms of these 4 ways that your karma ripens. And after these, you've heard these 4, there's nothing left in your life that you can't explain. If we just take these four, very simple. The first one is known as the fully ripened result, which is the type of rebirth you get. So as we might know from Buddha's teachings, he asserts a whole spectrum of possibilities of types of semchens, types of mind possessors in different realms of existence, some intensely suffering, some very blissful. And all of these are the fruit of the actions of those sentient beings. The typical view we have of where Christian, let's say, is there's heaven and there's God, there's heaven and hell, and you're sent there, you know, I mean, just simply speaking, isn't it? There's no view like that because there's no punishment, there's no rewarder. We create our own experiences. So even there's a very detailed description of what happens at the time of death in terms of what karma ripens, in terms of the next life that you're going to get. Tibetan Buddhists really like this, you know, go into great detail, especially in the Vajrayana teachings. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche goes into great depth into this in his book called How to Face Death Without Fear. There's a description of this death process. It's described in 8 stages of this gradual deconstruction of the components of a person, you know, and then how you stop breathing, and when the mind leaves the body, and then where you go then, and then when you get your next rebirth. It's all very detailed, it's all described, you know. So roughly speaking, they say, let's use us as an example, because we're all humans, I assume. No dogs in here with their hat on or something. And I don't know how we define ourselves these days. We're quite flexible. So, you know, roughly speaking, you'd say for all of us, not more than a few weeks, maybe up to 7 weeks, before our consciousness found its way to our present mother's fallopian tube, unless you were conceived in a more modern way, like in a Petri dish, but this is old-fashioned description. Not more than a few weeks before that, our consciousness, a continuity of our mind, was in a previous body. And we were, at the time of that death, we were gradually starting this death process that has these 8 stages. And maybe by about the time of the 3rd stage, when you start to lose the plot, when you've already begun to not see, not hear, your body starting to kind of feel a bit weak, your different elements are ceasing, the senses are ceasing. And about that time, very specific things happen. So, okay, back a bit. Remember, every millisecond of whatever we think and do and say, basically, this is my analogy, drops seeds into your bank vault. I mean, clearly Buddha doesn't talk about bank vaults, but it's a good analogy because there's nothing that you do, think and say that goes astray. It gets stored in your mind. Okay, so at the time of this, before you begin to really lose the plot, before you stop breathing, particular conditions arise that would trigger this particular karmic seed, in our case, of very strong, virtuous past action, of non-killing, probably, as Lama Zopa says, practice in the context of a spiritual path, even more precisely, practice in the context of keeping vows of non-killing. A very strong one of those seeds was triggered. So probably the condition that triggered it was when we were dying peacefully. And this is a crucial point. As Lama Zopa says in his book, How to Face Death Without Fear, that he says, if you want to help anybody in this life, when they need you most is at the time of death, at this precise point. Why? Because we've got billions of karmic seeds, billions of negative and positive. We've had all kinds of lifetimes, and all those seeds are stored in there. And at the time of death, we want a virtuous one to be triggered because that will cause us to get at least another decent human life, you know, so we can have a spiritual practice and keep on moving on our spiritual path without too much interference. So generally speaking, they say at the time of death, the mind being peaceful and therefore virtuous is the crucial condition. So that's the role of a helper. As Lama Zopa says, it's education we all need. Yes, doctors and nurses so kind, taking care of the body. Well, our job is to take care of the mind. And as Rinpoche points out, because of intense attachment, especially to this body, which we think of as me, this is the cause of the main suffering of incredible fear at the time of death for most people. So to have a person holding your hand, metaphorically, helping you be peaceful, helping you feel comfortable, doing your practice with you, reminding yourself, is an incredibly important role, Rinpoche says. So anyway, at this time of the death process starting, this, in our case, one of our very powerful virtuous actions of specifically non-killing, probably lived in the context of keeping a vow of non-killing, which is very powerful. If we've got time, we'll discuss this, was triggered quite literally, which they say in the teachings, is now the cause for why for us or any person for whom this is happening, death becomes a very pleasant experience. If a negative karmic seed is triggered because your fear is outrageous, there's no one helping you, you don't know what you're doing, you've never thought of impermanence, you're freaking out, fear naturally, death is difficult, then a negative seed will be triggered, and then death will be some shocking experience, very painful, because you're seeing your future suffering rebirth coming, something because your mind's getting more subtle. So anyway, in our case, we can deduce a virtuous karmic seed was triggered. Now, at the same time, all the virtuous karmic seeds that will produce our personality, it's the simplest way to put it, were also triggered right then. So, of course, this is the biggest shock because we think our personality comes from mummy and daddy. No, it does not. Not even a fraction. This sounds hilarious. You've got to think about it. It doesn't seem evident, but you've got to think about it, So my mummy, for example, was classical musician. Then her little Bobsy, that's me, she saw that I had potential. So she started to teach me music. So everybody would say, well, Robina's good at music because mummy gave her the genes. Well, mummy did give me genes. It's true. And genes and brains, it seems to me, without insulting geneticists and neuroscientists, they are simply physical indicators, I'd put it that way, of what's the karma of the person and what's in the mind of the person. Because the Buddha's saying that our personality karmic seeds are triggered before you even stop breathing in the past life. So I had a potential to play music because I must have done it before, and my mother had the potential to play music because she must have done it before, and they came conveniently together. How fortunate I was. My father, let's say, might have been angry. Oh, well, Robina's angry because her daddy's angry. No, my daddy had a tendency to be angry that he brought with him, and I had a tendency to be angry that I brought with me. So my father being angry with me can never make me angry if I don't have a tendency to be angry. That's the way to have to think about this. My mother could have taught me music till the cows come home, but if I didn't have the potential to play music, it would be on deaf ears. This is a really major point if we want to take karma seriously as a Buddhist, But you create yourself. As the Dalai Lama says, like self-creation. Which is not saying your parents don't play a role. Of course they do. But your mind is yours. This is such a hugely different one from our modern psychological neuroscientific views. It's massive. It's very fascinating. The third set of, so the first lot's called the fully ripened result. The second lot are called, really it's your personality traits. It's like intentions or tendencies similar to the cause. Well, guess what? A bunch of habits. You programmed your mind with a habit to kill, steal, love, be kind, generous, rich, poor, play music, you name it. Look at your personality. You brought it with you. This is really a powerful way to become accountable. You own your own mind. You own your own self. You own yourself. You created yourself. Not in a kind of magic wand sense, but in this evolutionary sense. Karma's like personal evolution. And then the third set of karmic seeds that are saying all triggered at this point, the programming of you for the next life, is called experiences similar to the cause, which is really how you're seen and treated by others. And look at it, let's face it, from the time we're conceived, we are very social beings. We rely upon other sentient beings, starting with a mummy and a daddy. We don't float in, we've got intense relationships, haven't we? Well, basically this karma is the way you're seen and treated by others throughout your life. This is the shocking one too. All your past actions are the cause of that. All your past actions are the cause of your personality. Your past actions are the cause of getting a human body. Mummy and daddy just had sex, and provided the egg and the sperm. How kind. That's their role. At that time, at least. And the fourth one is like, we don't just float around in the sky. We have environments in which we live. This seems a bit more abstract, but it's all explained. It's called environmental karma. So one example, for example, the non-killing action would cause a good human life, as opposed to an ant or a cockroach or other suffering realms. The second karmic seeds produce, so the second one, a tendency to not kill, would cause you to be born in this life, and from the second you're conceived, there'd be no thought to kill. My father went fishing. It never rose in my mind to go fishing with him. It didn't occur to me. Even when I went fishing one time to impress a boyfriend, no fish came to me. So not only did I have no tendency to kill, but I didn't have no fish had the karma to be killed by me. So I was empty-handed, you know. So that the cause of a human birth, for example, non-killing as a main seed produces a reasonable human life, you know. Second, the killing, not the habit to kill, the habit to not kill would produce a tendency to not kill. Now, look at the world, people. I mean, this is so sad. Look at most humans. We got a human life because of a non-killing karmic seed. We've got several bank vaults. Look at the 7 billion humans. A virtuous karmic seed of non-killing was triggered at the time we passed away in the last life that caused us when our mummy and daddy hopped into bed and we left the previous body to run there like a magnet. It's like a miracle. We got a human body. But now look at the next way. Vast majority of humans have a tendency to kill. If we don't kill humans, we kill, you know, animals. And if we don't like killing animals, we kill cockroaches and we kill rats and mice, you know. We can see this. In fact, when the Dalai Lama gives refuge and lay vows to big groups of foreigners, especially, you know, us type of people, as opposed to Asians who, like maybe modern Asians, all the same, all got the materialist view, isn't it? That ants and dogs don't have a soul. I mean, that's even the Christian teaching. I was taught, it's not being rude, it's again just stating facts. I was taught as a Catholic that animals are made by God for our benefit. Now, interesting view. It's not Buddha's, that's for sure. So the vast majority of humans have the tendency to kill, which is so tragic. It's like the worst one in a way, because you spend your life killing again, you know, because the tendency is there and you don't question it. But the result of it as a tendency is to not kill. How incredible. It's not accidental and it's not genes, because we know a non-killing mummy can give birth to a killer and vice versa. We know that. But here it's the past action. So if non-killing ripens as a tendency, this is really special. Now, if non-killing ripens as an experience, honey child, you won't get killed and you won't die young. Well, look at this one. Flip that over. Look at the babies who die. And it says in the medical records, no medical reason. Well, the karmic gas tank of morality of non-killing just ran out and they died. At birth, at 1 month, at 5 years, young people die, healthy people die, happy people die. We know this, but it all just seems so random, you know, so often random. Karma ran out, because karma's like a petrol tank. You put a certain amount in, you get a certain amount of mileage out of it. It's like that. It's not mystical, this is practical. So if you look at the other one, you know, look at the number of beings, humans, just humans who got a human life, but who, due to non-killing, but they had the third one of killing as an experience. So you get sick or you die young. No, not get sick, that's the fourth one. You die young or you get killed. Well, I even think of fetuses, you know. I always talk about how I had an abortion when I was 23. I was in London, I was a hippie. I'd been a Catholic, I gave up God, decided I preferred boys. I was always very committed to whatever path I took. I was a very good hippie. It was in 1968, I remember the National Health in England had just approved abortions. I felt very fortunate because I was with this Australian boy, not too much details, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. But I remember I was impressed because he got a pound an hour. I was earning 13 pounds a week in my little job, you know. I remember that. And he was an architect, I remember that. I didn't particularly like him, I remember that. But I thought, oh, I'll have sex, you know, I'll sleep with him, why not? I was a friendly hippie. Well, the second, without too much detail, I said, oh my God, I'm pregnant. I knew that second, and that's very common experience of women, because that's the Buddha's view at the time of having sex, when the egg and sperm come together, that's when the consciousness enters. One of my friends, her daughter and her daughter's husband were staying in her house while they were building their new house. And the daughter came down for breakfast and said, oh, Mum, I'm pregnant. And her mum said, when did you know? Oh, 20 minutes ago. You're supposed to laugh. Just had sex with a husband. Did you not hear me? Did you get it? You didn't laugh. You're supposed to laugh there. So many women have that experience. So it's very interesting, because that's the Buddhist view of when the consciousness tends to be there, is when the egg and sperm come together. It was crystal clear for me. So that means that person, I always think of it as a her. I don't remember. But I thought that, because the next thought I had was, I'm going to have an abortion. The next thought. No, clear, crystal clear. So the first one, this person had died recently. The karma to be born in my human womb was triggered. They had the main karma, and then they came to my human womb. And that second, the poor thing, hadn't much chance. I decided I'm going to kill him, you know. I'm not being rude, I'm just talking my language. So then what happened was they had the experience similar to the cause of another action of past killing, because we've got millions of karmic seeds that was then already was ripening. So 12 weeks later, I had an abortion, you know. So the fourth, and even I think of that, if we did our research, and I think I have heard it somewhere, somebody did some research, that the number of fetuses that die young or get aborted, they're all humans, right? They're all humans. They got the karma to be born as a human, but their karma ran out even before they got born. I think an awful lot would be that one. Somebody told me some numbers, I forget. Then the fourth way your karma ripens, the fourth way non-killing karma would ripen as an environmental result. It means you'd be fat and healthy and you don't get sick very much. You eat what you like. I always quote Warren Buffett. He's 90-something, that mega rich fellow, you know. He's 90-something. I read his biography. He's 90-something. His diet, his daughter said, I've never seen water pass his lips. He's 90-something, as fit as a fiddle. He even had prostate cancer recently, he got better. And apparently his main food, every meal, is a cheeseburger, vanilla ice cream, and some kind of flavored Coca-Cola. Well, I mean, you know, he should be dead. Okay? So this I'm talking about example, that would be the karmic environmental result. Whatever he eats, he's fat and healthy. And we know there are some people like this. And then we know other people, so fragile, you get sick easily, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, got 47 allergies. And now look at COVID. That's the collective environmental result of the millions of humans, you know, either of experience similar to the cause, you get sick, of environmental result, you get sick, or the experience similar to the cause, you die young, isn't it? It's collective karma, millions of humans all experiencing it. Environmental result and the third one. So every experience we have, everything that happens to us, everything we think, every bit of environment, every bit of this, that it is logical. There is a law that does run it. No one made up the law. It's not punishment, it's not reward. This is the expertise of these beings, and the Indians and the Tibetan. The Buddhists have got a very specific approach to it, a bit different from the Hindus, I think. But this is the natural law that runs the universe, the Buddha says. So now I think you need to ask me questions. In fact, I would say that if you looked at the big picture, the Buddhist worldview, the Buddhism is a worldview actually, it might be surprising to us, that if karma can be proved to be wrong, this is what Buddha is always saying, please prove me wrong, don't just believe me. If karma can be proved to be wrong, then the whole of Buddhism as a worldview would collapse into a heap of incoherent nonsense. And if it can be proved that the mind is not physical, the Buddha's wrong about that. Again, the whole of Buddhism, because all of the Buddha's teachings, tenets, views, concepts are based on these two things. They're in the absolute infrastructure of the whole Buddhist worldview, you know. So now I think I'd like to have some questions from you all, please. Any old questions at all? If there are any.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Venerable Robina. I'm here.
Hello there. Yes, talk to me.
Two questions.
Yes.
Once you receive the empowerment for certified Buddha purification and confession, or you receive the empowerment for the 100-syllable Vajrasattva practice, and if you took a break, you didn't chant it right away, do you lose the lineage?
If you didn't what, darling?
Huh?
If you didn't what?
You didn't chant it right away, like you forgot it for a few days. Do you lose
sweetheart,
the
you're such a good girl. Come on. Sweetheart, come on. Okay, so listen. You're saying if you did take an empowerment, then you have to check what the Lama who gave the empowerment requested of the students taking the empowerment that they should be committed to. So what was the commitment?
My teacher got mad at me for not chanting
Your
it.
teacher what?
My teacher got upset at me for not chanting it the next day.
Okay, what was the commitment at the time you took the empowerment? Your teacher might be upset. I'm not worried about that, but I need to know first, Was your teacher the one who gave you the empowerment?
Yes.
Okay, so what was the commitment at the time of the empowerment that your teacher explained to the disciples? That's the question.
She didn't explicitly say it.
Well, then you don't have a commitment then.
Okay.
Then you may be just lazy.
Yeah. And
That's the answer. You know, whenever you take an empowerment, especially in the Vajrayana, you absolutely have to check first, because every Lama is different. Some will say you must do this practice for the rest of your life. You must do a 6-month retreat. You must say 7 mantras a day. You've got to know first, because then you're basically shaking hands. Your teacher says, I'm going to give you this, and you have to agree to that. And you shake hands and you promise each of you to do your role. So if she didn't give you a commitment, then it's okay. You didn't break a commitment. But of course, she can still be mad at you for being lazy, which means you start to do it.
okay. And then would I still benefit from practicing purification from Vajrasattva and certified Buddhas, since I didn't
Darling, what do you mean you still benefit? What are you saying?
Because you know how in like Vajrayana practice, if you didn't receive the initiation or empowerment, like
Oh, you mean if you don't receive the empowerment? Sweetheart, it's always, listen, everything your mind does has a result. So if you're sitting there with no empowerment, but thinking, oh, you know, I regret all that nonsense because I'm sick of suffering, and then I have compassion, and then I do the mantra, how can it not bring a result?
Okay,
It's just that certain tendencies, certain things will make it more strong, that's all.
That makes sense. And then my last question would be, what is the karmic seed for having very good romantic love?
Honey, it's a whole bunch of things. Come on, it's a whole bunch of things. So you mean you want to get that one, so you make sure you do it. You want a nice boyfriend, do you? Or
Yes.
Or what? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Sweetie pie, listen to me. Okay. Listen. Listen. Any moment of any person, of any description, being kind to you and liking you is the fruit of your having been kind and being friendly in the past to that particular person. So if you want such an intense relationship as to actually live with a person in the same bed every day, then God knows what the causes are for that, but people seem to want that. I'm very happy for you. It means that means you need a strong karmic connection, from meaning past history with a certain person, to have that level of intensity of commitment. And then once you've started, darling girl, now the hard work will start. I don't know if you've thought about that part, which means giving up attachment, giving up anger, giving up jealousy, being patient, being humble. Then it'll last. All right. So what you got to do is, maybe if you have faith in the Dharma and the Buddhas and you like Tibetan Buddhism, you better go and do some Tara practice, because Tara's pretty clever at that. She'll find someone for you. But you got to, so basically you're having Tara kind of intervene, but then you do the practice, that helps nourish the karmic seeds that you must have way back from whenever with a particular person. So let's hope that they're a nice one that you ripen, okay? All right, darling. Yes, and yes, the man right here. Give the man the mic. Over here. Oh, sorry, you're here. Next, you sweetheart, go. Talk to me.
Venerable, how do we know that we each have the seed of Buddha?
How do we know
nature?
what?
That we each have the seed of Buddha nature, of Buddha potential.
You're going to have to, I mean, I'm deaf in my right ear and I'm finally getting hearing aids, but I need you to repeat it again.
Sorry. Venerable, how do we know, or why do we each have the seed of Buddha nature within us? Buddha potential.
I see. You mean, what is Buddha nature?
And how do we know we each have it, that potential within us?
So the question is, what is Buddha nature? I can't tell you. All right. It's not complicated. It's just those phrases, we don't talk like that. So you've heard of an acorn, right? And you know, even without being a botanist, someone can point to that little, whatever the shape is, oval little thing. You don't know it by looking, do you? But someone says, oh, you'll say, oh, what's that? And they will say, oh, that's an acorn. And you'll say, what's that? And they will say, it's a seed that if you put it in the ground and then nourish it with water and time and warmth, and eventually it'll turn into an oak tree like that over there. So that's you accept that, don't you? Okay, well then we don't talk like this, but it's very logical to say that an acorn by definition is a potential oak tree. You agree? So therefore, every acorn possesses oak tree nature. Can you hear that phrase? That's the meaning. We don't talk like that. So what it means is Buddha's entire teachings about what the mind is, his entire teaching about what the mind is and its nature, is that all minds are pure in their nature, insofar as all delusions, neuroses, ego grasping, and all the rubbish, all the delusions are not at the core of our being and can be removed. This is the total meaning underneath all Buddha's teachings, that mind is in its nature, and the Mahayana view would say, not only can you, okay, you've got two goals. If you're on the Theravada path, or the Hinayana path, you have the potential to achieve your own nirvana. So that's the first main teaching, that all minds are not, that all delusions, all neuroses, all ego grasping, all the misery, all that stuff is not intrinsic to us, is not at the core of our being. And we have to prove that, and the logic is all there. We have to study it. And that's very encouraging. The delusions don't define us. So the gradual work of controlling your body, speech, and mind, living in the discipline of vows and getting concentration, and then realizing, and then getting renunciation, then realizing emptiness, and then perfecting that realization, one life or other, you will have perfected all of that, and then, honey child, you're out of here and you don't come back. That's the first potential. But if you add the bodhicitta part to the mix, you can come back again and again because you have compassion for others, and then you will become a Buddha. It's the natural state, it's the natural potential of all minds, and it's logical insofar as delusions are not at the core of our being and can be removed utterly. That's the point. That's the logic. And so you can't know that unless you study the mind, what the mind is. And that's why it's not neuroscience, that's for sure. Are you with me? Are you communicating? And it's very encouraging, because our trouble is we identify ourselves with our misery. I'm hopeless, I'm angry, I'm jealous, I'm no good. We overwhelmed by it. But to even hear these teachings and to read the teachings, how mind in its nature is pure and clear, is very encouraging. Do you understand? You hear me? Is that... Use the mic, darling. Use the mic. Yeah.
I feel like some people don't believe that. Like some people I speak with, they say, no, I think we are suffering at, like, the more that suffering is the core.
People have different views. What are you telling me that for?
Okay. I'm just wondering, like, if there's a logical, some kind of Buddhist logic explanation or karmically or something that
Honey child, I gave it to you, but you have to study it. I've given you the logic, but you have to know what it means, a delusion. You have to know what it means and read it and think about it. And even then, if you are a Buddhist, it still takes time to think that. But you can't just say, oh yeah, it's illogical. I've tried to give you the summary of it. It is, from the Buddhist perspective, absolutely logical. The delusions are adventitious, but you got to learn what a delusion is so you can confidently know that yourself, don't you? So you have to study the teachings, darling. What I just said was a good answer, but you didn't write it down, so it's too late now. Okay. Yes. Oh, hang on here, Antonio, on the Zoom. Then you next. So Antonio, what would you like to say to me, sweetheart?
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having us.
I can't hear you, darling. You better put up your volume, or like my volume, maybe. Oh,
Could
here we
you
go. Talk. Good. Talk. Oh, that's no good. Listen, no, I have to get the question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we go.
Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you, sweetheart.
Okay, thank you for having us, for starters. I feel a bit confused by just one thought that you mentioned, as you mentioned the karmic exhaustion upon that point where, say, a baby dies or someone dies in their youth in a negative. So it seems as the karma ran out. So this led to that concept. Now, maybe I'm confused in the belief that once you've reached Buddhahood, the karmic cycle comes to a cessation and the karmic seed is gone. Is there such thing as an end of the karmic cycle? I can't hear you.
Yeah, that's the point, Antonio. That's the whole point of practice. Like I just said here before, Buddha's teachings say that all the delusions are not at the core of our being, and that we can totally purify the delusions, therefore totally purify negative karma, therefore completely finish the negative karma and no longer need to be reborn. But if we're on the Mahayana path, we will choose to be reborn to be of benefit to others and become a Buddha and benefit countless sentient beings. Then you're out of the whole thing. You're completely in charge of everything now. Absolutely, it's the whole point. That's the whole point of all practice. That's the whole point, sweetheart.
All right. And with that, of the higher karmas of pacifying, destroying, magnetizing, and enriching, how do those fall in with?
I don't understand those phrases. I've never heard that. What's that mean?
I believe it's from the I mean, it's like a Trogyam Rinpoche.
Oh, I say so the trouble is in the different systems, they use different terminology and I don't understand. the difference.
I believe this follows from the Tantric and Hindu traditions of what karma is, and there's.
Oh, I see. So what's the question? So don't use those terms. What's the question though? Just as a general question.
It would seem that within the 4 actions of karma applied there, when there is a chance to create karma, the action that's best followed is the one that ends the karmic cycle. Does that seem accurate?
Well, I mean, okay. On the path to Buddhahood, we start, the very first starting point is at least control, is to discipline our body and speech and stop harming others, because that stops at least our own future suffering. So the result of that is we get another decent human rebirth and we can keep on practicing. Then as you advance, you get to know your mind, and now you can start to give up even attachment and all the delusions which perpetuate karma, and now you can become really blissful and radiant, and then you can get single point of concentration, and then you can achieve your nirvana by realizing emptiness, and then, and then there's a bodhicitta path as well. It's all stages and stages of practice. So, I mean, there's all laid out exactly what we're supposed to do to get rid of negative karma and completely purify it and not have the karma reborn in this ridiculous samsara anymore, and then have the choice to do exactly what we want and manifest in bodies all over the universe. So those words you said sounded okay, but could be a bit complicated. It's more simple than that in a way. It just means stop being non-virtuous and start being virtuous. That's the essence of it. Non-virtue is the problem. That creates negative karma and causes suffering. And practicing virtue is what causes happiness. So we just keep growing that, growing that, growing that. It's very simple, actually. Are we communicating? You don't look like very convinced, Antonio.
No, not entirely. It would seem then that while we remove all the negative karma, we're building positive karmas until a
Of
point.
course you are, because sweetie pie, when you're a Buddha, darling, you haven't given up both negative and positive karma. That's nihilistic. By the time you're an enlightened being, Antonio, you only have billions and billions and billions and billions of fruits of positive karma. You're no longer in the thrall of the ridiculous law of negative and positive anymore. You're just naturally virtuous. You cannot be any other way. You're naturally virtuous and naturally wise and totally powerful.
You
So you're
feel
not in the usual misery of the rubbish law and cause and effect, but doesn't mean, but still everything you do is still cause and effect. It's logical. You're only virtuous now, and that's all the fruit of your past virtuous karma and the finishing of your negative karma.
a basket full of positive karma. And
Yes,
that's the end of
Buddhahood is the result of infinite amounts of wisdom and virtue. It's the fruit of virtuous karma. What do you think it is? It's the fruit of virtuous karma. And you just live it out eternally as being countlessly kind to sentient beings in all the realms of existence.
Thank you.
Do you understand, darling?
I think so now. Yes.
I hope so. Thank you, Antonio. Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
We'd like to shorten the duration between the cause and the effect. Is there a mental?
You mean you want the negative karma to write more quickly?
No. Yes. We have a limited amount of time here in this body.
Well, this is very. Oh. Turn it off. Here, done. Off. There it is.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to be able to know if there was a process to shorten?
But there is
time?
a process. Just practice hard, and I promise you, all the shit will come down on your head. It's a little bit like being in a washing machine. All the dirt comes out. So a friend of mine, for years, one of the ways of thinking about this, one of the ways of your attitude towards suffering is that it is every moment of suffering is the fruit of negativity by definition. So even just being delighted with it, instead of how dare this happen to me, poor me, instead of increasing the misery, you lighten it and you hasten the purification. Because every moment a negative feeling arises or negative action arises or is experienced, you just finished it. So be delighted that you're finishing it, and then you can increase it. But I mean, so a friend of mine who's a meditator, years and years, serious Vajrayana meditator, 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats. And at some point he was out of his brain with rage and aggression. He was, he was depressed about it. And he went to Lama Zopa. And Rinpoche laughed and laughed and laughed. He said, fantastic. The dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. So you know yourself, as soon as you start working on your body, the muscles hurt. It's not bad, it's good. So the more you practice, the more negativity will ripen, the more, and you'll just hasten through very quickly.
So if you're doing a virtuous act,
Yeah.
does your mindset matter? Is intention an important
Well, that's
aspect?
another whole full stop. Turn the page, new question.
Okay.
Don't just act like it's only the previous sentence. Come on.
Right.
Ask the question. Again.
Supposing we are performing a virtuous act,
Well, I hope you do a few, yeah.
right?
Right.
Does our cognitive
Okay,
understanding?
now we have to describe the way karma works. We will do that. So any more questions first? All right. Yes, sweetheart. Yes, sweetheart. And then back there. Yes.
I think I can speak pretty loud. Can you hear me okay?
Good. I think they're recording it, and the microphone functions to record. I think. Good, sweetheart. Good. Talk to me. I'll answer your question after this. Yes, go, sweetheart.
I'm very interested. In
I think it's on.
Is it on?
I think you got to press the button.
Yeah.
No. Don't think so.
Yeah. Better?
I tried.
Better?
I don't know. Go.
Go. Okay, I'll try to be as loud as possible. I'm very interested to hear about your thoughts on karma in relation to your work with prisoners.
How do you mean by that? I mean, what more precisely, what do you mean?
Okay, did you teach them about karma and what was their response?
Oh, anybody in prison, thank you. Anyone in prison who is, okay, when I was working with Liberation Prison Project, I stopped in 2009. I know still some people in prison. Then, I mean, I found that because the people who were in prison who wanted Buddhism, they love it all the more. They love the teachings about karma, and they love the fact that you can purify karma. They were on the edge of their seats with delight. Yeah, for sure. I tell you who really, I always teach karma, especially is in Israel. So many Tibetan Buddhists in Israel, I'm straightforward about karma, you know, you've got these, anyway, never mind. So listen, I want to now, no, listen, yeah, good. That's about what I have to say. So next person, sorry, before we get this person's question. Yes, sweetie pie, man in the back, give him the mic. Give him the mic. Yes.
I just want to ask if
Start again.
I just want to ask if eating meat creates negative karma.
You do what?
Eating meat
Eating meat.
creates negative karma.
Eating meat. Okay, let's do it briefly. Okay. Well, first of all, I always make the comment that's the only way we ever frame what ought to be the question: what is the karma of using the flesh of an animal for our advantage? That's the broader question, because it also means shoes, leather belts, silk. You with me? So it's a broader one, but I think we always talk about food because we're very attached to food. So we get very neurotic about food. So when we become sort of fanatic vegans and vegetarians, we get very political and fanatic. I'm not being rude, but we always get fanatic because we're so attached to food. That's why my own comment is I think sometimes we get very freaked out about sexual violence as opposed to violence. Somehow it seems to be worse because we're attached to sex. So I think our attachments kind of warp our mind a bit. So, okay, that's my first point. I want to say that. Second point, I think the fact is every single tiny thing we do does leave a karmic seed in the mind, and leading up to his point, which is the crucial one, very much to do with intention and motivation, which we'll go into. But the thing is, I remember one time on Facebook, no, I was in Liverpool in England, and I went to this cheese shop and I bought some kick-ass cheddar, right? And then I put a picture of me in the shop with the cheese, and then these people, a bit fundamentalist vegans, got very upset. How dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese? I didn't want to be political, you know, but I remember thinking, well, okay, I always wondered how many, I always wondered how many bugs get killed on the road when you drive a car, right? Because we know it's billions. So sure enough, you Google it, and some bloke in Holland had done the research. And it was sort of like, I don't know what the numbers, but something like trillions of sentient beings get squashed on one car on just the number plate, per kilometer, per whatever. So it's an awful lot of sentient beings get murdered when we drive a car. Now, they're sentient beings as far as the Buddha is concerned, like the cow is, or like the chicken, right? They're both sentient beings. So then the guy, the fundamentalist, he said, well, you can't help that. That's collateral damage. I thought, well, tell the mozzies that, you know, tell the bugs that. Like, who cares? So that seemed a bit weird to me. And then I read, another thing was even more interesting. This Australian journalist got a bit fed up with the fundamentalist vegans. I'm not saying I'm a vegan or not a vegan. It's not the point. I'm just talking about people who are fundamentalist. I mean, how marvelous to never eat meat. I mean, how marvelous, nothing wrong. Nothing, that's not the point. So this bloke, he talked about some scientist, and he talked about some wheat field near where I live in Australia, in Melbourne. And in the off season, when they're not growing any wheat, it got overrun by these millions of little field mice. And he said they were so cute. He had pictures of them. They sing love songs to each other, he said. And then, of course, when they had to grow the wheat, what do you think they did to the little field mice? Slaughtered them. So who was the wheat for? Well, 20% for the bulls, for the eat meters, and 80% for the holy vegans. And even then he said, oh, you can't help that. Now, do you think that's not a bit schizophrenic? So in other words, what I'm getting at is it's not just a question of do you or don't you put meat in your mouth. The world is slightly more complex than that, and billions of creatures die even if you shut your mouth and never even breathe again. Creatures just are dying everywhere you turn. For vegans, for vegetarians. So we've got to have a bigger picture. The general point is to try not to do actions that harm too many sentient beings. We do our best, you know. So of course the meat industry, there's no argument. It's pretty phenomenal the way it's destroying the planet. That can be proved, I think. That's another whole discussion. But another things to also factor in, our trouble is when we do become vegetarian and vegan, and I'm not being rude here, just looking what I've observed, you know, in my discussions with people, we get a bit holy. Oh, like I'm such a saint, no creatures die now because of me. Don't be ridiculous. Look, probably more creatures died for your holy rice, you understand, than one lamb chop. We've got to be more humble about it and know that you can't, and this is the Buddha's point, that the whole universe is covered in sentient beings, billions of sentient beings, the tiny baby ones you can't even see. I mean, our armpit is a zoo. Our mouth is an entire ecosystem. So we've got to be a little bit more broad and spacious in our view. In general, are we communicating? So the point is, you know, do our best to have a pure wish not to harm sentient beings. So if it includes not buying the meat to also help the planet, fantastic. But, you know, but my feeling is on a personal level, if you go to your grandma and she spent some money on buying you a lamb chop, not knowing you're a vegetarian. Oh no, I don't eat meat. I mean, so what's wrong with it? It's just the same yuck as carrots. I mean, we're so a bit hysterical, I think, even we don't even eat OXO cubes. What do you call them in America? But you put those tasty cubes in a soup. Bouillon, you use the French word. I mean, you won't even touch a thing with a bouillon in it. I know I'm being controversial here, but I'm just trying to think about these things. Are we communicating or not? So, you know, I remember one friend who invited a Tibetan Lama, and she knew this old monk, he ate meat. So she cooked meat, and the translator said, oh, I don't eat meat. And he said, you eat that meat. The woman had offered you lunch. Shut your mouth and eat your damn lamb chop, you know, out of kindness to your grandma. This is my approach to but the big picture, you know, is have compassion, of course. Try not to harm living beings. Do you understand? Do our best. And then if you're going to eat meat, I mean, I remember Lama Zopa said one time that even a bone that's 1,000 years old, by saying mantra, which is said to be very pure, and Lama Zopa knows more mantras than anybody on the planet. I don't know where he gets them from, but he knows so many mantras. Except he's dead now. I keep forgetting. Lama Zopa died. Never mind. They're all in a book. So anyway, the point is, he said, because the mantra has power, right? And then when you say it, you bless your speech, because mantra is the air. And then when you blow on that bone, he said, even the consciousness that lived there 1,000 years ago, wherever they are now, they'll get the benefit because of the power of mantra. So, you know, blow on the chop. And then blow on the little fishies and blow on the ants and blow on, at least bless them. There's things we can do to mitigate and redeem. But meanwhile, try to develop compassion, not harm sentient beings. Best. You understand? Good. Who else? So in motivation and intention. Okay, I'll talk about that now. This is the point. So how do we create karma? Well, in order for any action, let's say non-killing, a specific action of non-killing to leave a karmic seed in your mind, that needs 4 things in place. And that's a complete karmic seed. And that will be one that will drop into your main bank vault. And in our case was one of the seeds that was triggered at the time of our death, which caused us to find our way to our present mummy's fallopian tube, to get a human life, in other words, you know? So the first thing that has to be in place is the object, which is a living being. You know, it has to be the mouse, for example, in your kitchen. That's the first, number 1 of 4. 2 is your mind involved in it. And there's various things, but 2 main things. So the word intention, we often use it to be equivalent of motivation, but it's actually different. Intention is like bare bones, I will. You understand? Or I will not. So there's I must not harm that creature, has to be in your mind. An intention not to kill has to be there first. Now, the crucial piece, like this is, 1 is the object, 2A is the intention, 2B is the motivation. And in this case, compassion. Poor mouse, doesn't want to harm, doesn't want to suffer. 3, you do the action, you catch the mouse. 4, result, living mouse. You let it out. Thank you, Robina. Bye-bye, mouse, happy mouse, you know. That's simply speaking, that's a complete action of non-killing. Now, the crucial piece in there is the second one. Not even intention, but motivation. So now flip it over to let's say an action of generosity, which is a virtuous action. So the first thing in place has to be a person. You don't give, money to a tree or drop it on the ground, you give it to a person. So there's an object, a person. Second is intention. I will give money to that person. 3, motivation, generosity. But let's say you're rich and I want to get into your, I want to, be around you. So I'm all lovely and nice and give you a gift, but I want your money, So my motivation stinks. You can't say I created much virtue. My motivation polluted the whole action. You get your $20. Do you understand? But I don't create much virtue because my motivation was lousy. Equally, you could even say, when most of us kill our pussycats and dogs these days, and our veterinarians spend all their time killing, it's so unfortunate. You could even say, if 1 is your cat, 2, intention, I will kill my cat, except we give it Greek names called euthanasia, put it down, put it to sleep, we say. It's called kill. I will kill my cat. But your motivation, you have compassion, right? You really do know your poor pussycat suffering, but you can't bear the suffering and you think I must kill it. So your motivation is compassion. 3, you kill the cat or get your vet to do it, which is worse because there's 2 people are killing now. And then 4, dead cat. That's a complete action of killing. But it's not so heavy because your motivation, you meant well. But as Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. I'm very sorry. You need wisdom. So the fact of the matter is, we always say, oh, well, I meant well and my poor pussycat, but we never ask, did it benefit my pussycat? Now, from the Buddhist perspective, the only way to be confident it benefited your pussycat was that your pussycat got a nice human rebirth so it could meet the Dalai Lama and have a spiritual path. But who has got that wisdom? Nobody. So we intervene in the most arrogant ways, thinking because we feel good about it. You maybe didn't create much negative karma. Where'd you put your poor pussycat? From the frying pan into the fire? Come on. So it's something to think about. Are we communicating, or am I saying too many things too quickly? Because I've got such a short time, you see. So intention and motivation is the crucial piece. Even like no karma. Let's say you're homeless, and I walk past. There's 1, the object, homeless person. 2, intention. No intention to give money. I'm not interested. Therefore, no motivation. So 0 karma. 3, my $20 falls out of my pocket. You get your $20, you're happy, but 0 karma from me because my mind wasn't involved. So the mind is the crucial thing, because the mind is the recipient of the seeds, of the imprints, of the programming. Mind creates karma, body and speech just carry it out, Are we communicating, people? So every millisecond we are creating karma. So this gets us to vows. I've got to tell you about vows, I'm sorry. I've got a whole half an hour. I can speak so many things in a half an hour, I tell you. Okay, listen to this. Lord Buddha loves his vows, okay? Now, we say vows and we feel like someone's squashing us and telling us not to do something. But you think about this. If you have to learn to drive a car, and if you wrote down everything you vowed not to do, I think you'd have a list of quite a few things. Wouldn't you agree? And you do not feel, oh, I'm allowed to put I'm allowed to turn left if I'm allowed to, put the foot on the accelerator while I'm putting it on the brake if I want to. No, you're not. The car will explode. I'm allowed to go 100 miles an hour. No, you're not, to get caught. I mean, so like we're happy to keep those vows and you have to learn them. So what are those vows for? They're programming your mind so you become a better driver. Well, what are these vows here? We're programming our mind in order to become a better human being, for God's sake, you know. So the vows are psychologically very powerful. They even say in the teachings that a vow, the way Buddha describes it, these sets of vows that you take in front of somebody, you know, and they're all to do with not killing, not stealing, not the first set of vows. The very first set of vows are all the ones about disciplining your body and speech. You harness the energy of your body and speech to not kill, not steal, not lie, not this, not that. But you have to ask the question, why? And I forgot to answer earlier when I said about God. Jesus says, because God says so, but Buddha says, oh, I think I said it. Buddha says, don't kill, don't steal, because it hurts people. Because people don't like it. It's a natural law. But the crucial piece here, which I think we miss in the West, the reason Buddha's exhorting us not to kill, steal, and lie isn't because even that it harms others. He says, guess what, Robina child? It harms you. You program your mind in those tendencies. Why would you want to continue to kill? Why would you want it to get killed? Why would you want to be born in the lower realms? Why would you want to have a lousy environment? You don't. Of course, it's a big ask because we don't know about all these things and we haven't got clairvoyance, but we're taking it as our hypothesis. So the reason to abide by the laws of karma and the reason to live in vows is for your benefit. It's the best way to practice. Lord Buddha says that the vows, or they say in the teachings, that vows are like a subtle physical energy visible to clairvoyance. You know, it's very subtle, very powerful. So what a vow is this powerful decision, an intentional decision that you make. From now, when you take in front of somebody, until I die, I will not kill. I will not lie. I will not steal. And this is the point now. This is the one main point. Okay, as I said before, the mind involved is the key factor. There could be a mouse in your kitchen, number one. Number two, no intention, no compassion, no motivation. 3, you put your foot on the mouse, right? And 4, dead mouse. So, you know, but no karma. Same with the generosity. Now, also, in other words, if the mind isn't involved, there's no karma. So here we are sitting in this room with no thought not to kill. We're being nice people. We're being nice people, but we have no thought not to kill. So as the teachings say, just to get a decent human body at the time of this death, you need bucket loads of intentional, rich, delicious, non-killing karmic seeds just to get a human body in your bank vault. So if the only time we're going to not kill intentionally is when you meet the cockroach, when you meet the rat, when you meet the ex-husband, you have to make a decision, I will not kill. It's when you have the thought, I will not kill. That's when you drop a karmic seed in your bank vault. So you need bucket loads of them. But we don't meet that many rats and cockroaches. I mean, my co-op where I live, they slaughter them there. So I have a nice rat-free house. I'm lucky, I'm happy, but I never have the thought not to kill. So if you have a vow not to kill, the vows are so tasty for the Buddha. As Lama Zopa says, 24 hours a day that you have the vow in your mind stream, this subtle energy, 24 hours a day you have the vow in your mind stream of not killing, you're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing. Whereas you'd only tick over virtuous seeds when you have an intention not to kill if you didn't have the vow. So like having vows is like a no-brainer, you know. That's how they talk. Are we communicating? All right. I love living in vows. That's why I'm a nun wearing these 14th century robes. What do you think? That's the quickest way to accumulate lots of virtuous karma and to purify, puts atomic bombs under your tendencies. So if you live in vows and you wake up next life in a good mother, really good mind, no negative tendencies, you'll have people nice to you, loving to you, kind to you, they'll just think you're wonderful, they'll never harm you, kill you, steal you, lie to you. 3, and have a delicious environment. Now, is that not at least what we want? Just even a better human birth. And the way to get it is live in vows and be a nice person. It's not complicated. Any questions? Yeah. No, I mean, forget that, then there's nirvana, then there's Buddhahood. It's just one step at a time. Yes. What? Give us the mic, please. Any questions on Zoom? Yeah, Jacob, good Jacob, you talk to me. In a minute, Jacob, won't be long. Won't be long, Jacob. Okay, go.
Once you take the vow, for example, the 5 precept for lay people, and then you drop one of them.
You're such a nervous girl. You want to be such a good girl. You're always worried about breaking everything. What are you talking? You're a human being, but you know, you got to watch what you're doing. Oh, if I'm driving the car and I suddenly forgot to put the brake on instead of the accelerator, what's going to happen? You're going to die. Well, then you better watch your vows, isn't it? What's it? Sorry, what's your question? I'm just being a bit mean to you. I'm just being a bit mean to you. Go on.
Oh, it's okay. I don't think so.
What's the question, darling?
If you drop a vow.
If you break a vow.
No, not break a vow. You drop it.
What do you mean you give it away?
Yeah, you like you no longer
to kill her. Who you decide to kill?
No. Like once you take the vow and you decide that you cannot keep it, so you in front of a shrine you say, "I'm giving up this vow," and that's a damage.
Excuse me, stop. When you take lay vows, you got 5. Don't cheat on a partner. Don't have alcohol. Don't steal. Don't kill. So which of those do you decide to want to do? You're going to kill people? You're going to jump on somebody else's partner? What do you want to do? Which one?
No. I mean the sexual misconduct
yes,
one.
there's 5 vows there.
Yeah, I mean, but very strictly, it's like abstinence from before marriage.
Excuse me, you are mistaken. You're a lay person. You can have much sex as you like, as long as you don't cheat on him. There's no law that says you shouldn't have sex. Monks and nuns have no sex.
I guess my teacher is very strict.
Well, then it's up to her to decide. If you want to take particular vow to not have sex, then you just have to decide. But you're the boss of your life, dear, not your teacher.
Okay.
You mean she said don't have sex and you change your mind now?
Yeah.
But I mean, she told you not to do it, or you took a vow?
No, I took the vow and
you
then.
did take a vow. For how long? For life?
Yeah.
Well, I think you'll be more careful what vows you take. Come on, girl, you're in charge of your life.
Okay.
Think about it, sweetheart. Come on.
Okay.
Look into it. Discuss it with her. You
Okay.
better. I mean, it's very different. I can't talk like that. I don't know what to say to you. You better discuss it with her, I think. She's got her own style, so you better discuss with her, darling.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay, Jacob, you had a question.
Yeah.
Jacob, talk to me.
Do you hear me?
You've gone away.
Can you hear me? I'm right here. Oh wait.
There's
I
Jacob.
raised my
Talk to
hand.
me,
Can you hear me?
Jacob.
Can you hear
I'll
me?
put my thing on. You've got to turn yours
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
Okay? Turn yours off. Talk to me,
Can you hear
darling.
me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, do plants possess mind? And also, I can't hear you, by the way.
Things, according to the Buddhist analysis, what's labeled a plant, can we turn yours off? Okay, is not what's called a sentient being. But that's for us to find out when we get clairvoyant, then we can prove it. I mean, on the other hand, there are trillions of sentient beings pervading wherever there are plants, rocks. There's not an atom of space where you won't find living beings. So the difference between a sentient being is like you, this piece of flesh here, which is the same character as the rock, it's the 4 elements. The difference is that this piece of flesh that's yours is embodied, is the embodiment of a consciousness, but the rock isn't. A flower isn't. But that's the Buddha's view. That's we've got to look into that. All right.
So could like a forest be an embodiment of mind technically? Could that like in general, like a whole?
No, I mean, not according to the Buddhist view. Not according to the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view, there are trillions of sentient beings, many of them we can't see, like hell beings, spirits, gods. They're sort of got subtle physical energy. So in other words, the Buddhist view is just because you can see something, doesn't move and things, doesn't mean there's a sentient being. And because you can't see it, doesn't mean there's not a sentient being there. It's a bit of a different analysis. So you just have to look into that. All right. Oh, darling.
Thank you.
Someone else. Any questions? So maybe we should talk about purification then, shouldn't we? Shall we? Yes. Yes. Good. Okay, hang on. Me, yeah. There you go.
So in Tibetan Buddhism, we see a concept of merit.
What?
Of merit.
Merit, creating virtuous actions, yeah.
So
Accumulating virtuous tendencies in the mind, yes.
is there any difference between how you use the word virtue and merit, and how do you?
I mean, okay. The way they talk, I think the way they talk. Merit is a term that's used to building up lots of virtue, basically. And so, in other words, if you keep getting stolen from, they will say, oh, he's got no merit, meaning he can't access much generosity karmic seeds in his bank vault, but he keeps accessing his stealing karmic seeds. So you haven't accumulated, it's sort of like merit is like spiritual petrol, spiritual gas in your tank. So if you've got lots of generosity karma from the past, then you won't have problems with money. That means you have lots of merit. Good things happen. It's just a general term for having accumulated lots of virtuous karmic seeds. So the word virtue is referring to a positive state of mind or positive action, such as loving, kind, generous, forgiving. Non-virtuous action will be, killing, stealing, etc., etc. So merit is like an accumulation of virtue that's in your gas tank that enables us to have the fact that we can have anything happen that's good. People can smile at you. You get your job. You walk down the street, no one kills you. We've got masses of merit. We must have accumulated lots of virtuous karma that literally protects us through our life. It's like that. It's not meant to be mystical. It's like logical. You with me? Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Somebody. Yes.
I recall that thank you for the talk, by the way.
Okay, good.
I recall that you had the example where your boyfriend buys your cab home. You remember
My
that?
boyfriend, what does he do?
He buys the cab to get to, and you said
What do you say?
it buys you an Uber to get home.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You remember that, right? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And we said that was good karma. Well, I guess my question is, whose karma is it? Is it his karma or is it is it your karma?
Arising. So that fetus that little sentient being who came to my womb, right? It was a human, whoever it was in his past life, a virtuous karmic seed of non-killing was triggered that programmed its little mind to run to my human womb. Do you understand? So that's huge. That's the karma of that person to come to my womb. And clearly it's a dependent arising. I had to have the karma to have them come to my womb. I mean, you've got to have two people together, What do you say? What do they say that takes two to tango? Do you understand? It's got to be both. If I had no karma to have her, she'd miss me. She'd go somewhere else. So there's got to be collective karma. So the person who gets stolen from has the karma to be stolen from, and the person who steals from them has had the karma to steal. It's got to be dependent arising. This is the third way that karma ripens. It's called experiences similar to the cause. It's very much to do with all the collective karma. I mean, we're social beings and we meet each other and things happen, Do you understand?
Yes, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So you could have the karma, really strong karma. Never mind. I think I've explained it. It's okay. It's very dependent arising, very interdependent, Can't just happen in isolation. No, okay. You could lose your money. Put it that way. No one stole from you. No one stole your money. Your $400 sitting under a damn tree. So there's no sentient being who stole from you, but that could be just that also must be due to stealing. But I don't know how come. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know about that one. There's got to be a cause. There's always a cause. If it happens, you must have caused it. And if it doesn't happen, you mustn't have caused it. It's a pretty basic rule to go by. And then the intricacies of what and how, as we progress in our spiritual path, we can learn to see that. Do you understand? Yes, at the back. Yes, the man in the... Yes, all I can see is vague things because my light is so bright here. Okay, talk to me.
What is the bank vault? Or what is the mechanism?
I know, it's your mind, your consciousness.
Recording.
It's just your mind. It's so abstract for us. It's so abstract because the mind isn't your brain. It's not physical, but it's awareness. That's what it is, and it's so subtle. So really, I think programming is probably a really good way to put it. Programming, because then it seems a seed seems too concrete, but programming is kind of a nice way of saying it. So by killing, you program your consciousness with killing. And then because you have because when you kill, you have to be killing beings. So you have strong karma with those beings. So that attracts you to meet each other again. So the karma in their mind and the karma in your mind, and you come together. But the mechanism is the mind. Karmic imprints are in the mind. There's nowhere else. So programming is probably a good way to put it, I'd say. They use the term analogy, seeds. I say the word bank vault. It's just analogies,
Yeah.
It's your mind, your consciousness.
But when a sentient being Buddhas,
When a sentient being what?
when a sentient being Buddhas, when a sentient being becomes a Buddha,
Oh, yes, yes.
then is a Buddha still possessor of mind?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, technically, for some reason, they would say he's no longer a sentient being, but he's still got a mind. So when you're Buddha, so right now, there's you in this body, okay? What's your name?
Nick.
Mick. There's Mick in this body. So your consciousness is in this body. You're a mind possessor. But because let's say you are deluded. Let's say you're not really a Buddha. Let's say you're not a Buddha. You're pretending. But if you're a real human being, your mind's stuck in this body, right? Like the rest of us. And because we live at the grosser level, sensory and conceptual, our minds are very, very limited. We don't remember 99% of today. It's like a joke, you know, and we can't see in the future. We can't see the past. We're very limited. So as you progress, lessening delusions and purifying your mind, you're literally, and as you get concentration, literally your consciousness literally expands. And as you get single point of concentration, then you get what they call clairvoyance, quite literally, because you've accessed a subtler level of your mind, which can cognize phenomena that are more subtle, the past, the future, the minds of others. As this gets more and more as you progress until eventually you become a Buddha. Your consciousness now, which is not physical, finally is no longer confined by space or time or matter. It literally is where their existence. You know every mind of every being, all the past, all the present, all the future. You have infinite compassion for every single one as if they're you, and wait for it, you have the infinite power to manifest this mind of yours in billions of forms throughout billions of universes for billions of eons for the sake of billions of suffering sentient beings. So way to go, baby. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, I know it sounds like science fiction. What can I do? What else? Yes.
Thank you. Similar to that question, so you mentioned in the beginning the mind is beginningless and endless. So mind of Buddha is also endless.
Absolutely.
And so the mind doesn't have karmic seed anymore.
You could say, okay, listen, in general, when you, even well before you're a Buddha, you've gone beyond the usual samsaric nonsense of cause and effect. But until then, we are locked into that system. Everything we do is a karma. Everything we experience is the fruit of karma. But when you're finally out of it, having realized emptiness, having developed bodhicitta, becoming a Buddha, still everything you do is cause and effect in the simplest sense, but you're no longer in the thrall of samsaric karma. You can do what you like. But everything still brings results. Of course it does. How could it not? It's
so
just
it's still
natural
dependent
law.
arising.
The
Buddha's
everything's
mind
dependent
is
on
still...
arising. Of course it is, Doc. Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Of course it is, sweetheart.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course it is, yeah. Nothing can be outside that.
Okay.
Everything by definition is dependent on arising. Of course. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Yes, people. No questions. Nobody on Zoom. Yes. Somebody. Yes, sweetheart.
Slightly sensitive question.
Sensitive?
Yes, but you got me curious. Does the decision to have an abortion create negative karma?
Sweetheart, okay. Everything we do, say, and think necessarily, you can say brings consequences, but it sounds heavy, like blame. It brings results. Just how it is. And the character of what you think, motivated by whatever you motivate, determines the character of the action, the intensity of the karma you create in your mind. And then whatever you do with your body and speech to follow through with that also increases the karma. Of course it does, everything is. So each person, you can have principles about this seed brings that fruit, but you put it in 27 different gardens and it'll look 27 different ways because it's very subtle. The general principles of karma, everything we think and do and say, that's motivated mainly by a negative thought brings a suffering result. Everything that's motivated by a positive karma brings a positive, a happy result, you know. So as long as we know the principles and then we have our own practice according to our karma, we do our best and try to not harm sentient beings. And then if we do, we can purify it. There's no karma we can't purify.
Thank you.
So I always use my example, you know, I'm not trying to critical, I'm trying to, many women can't bear to talk about abortions, but I always bring it as an example, you know. And I look at my mind back then, I had no thought to harm this little baby. I just knew I didn't want a baby. I didn't even think it was a baby. I just knew I didn't want what came out the other end. Do you understand? So, and this is what's fascinating. This is what's interesting. And it's not blaming the poor baby, but the intensity of the karma of the baby from the way it killed me in the past very much impacts upon my intensity to wish to kill it back. It's very fascinating. It's sort of obvious. If I really punch you hard, you're going to really want to punch me hard back, you know? Do you understand? It's very kind of dependent arising, isn't it? So it's not blaming the baby. But the karma was fairly strong. But I had no anger. I had no thought of harming anybody. I didn't even think I'm being selfish. I just didn't want, the karma was so strong. Things can be that way. You don't even, it's almost beyond intention. The karma is so strong for the thing to happen. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So then, but I have to take responsibility. I did it. And I learned a lot from it. I didn't think of it then. Only since I've been a Buddhist, I think about it. There's no karma you can't purify. And also when we have this idea we've had beginningless lives, we can be a bit humble with ourselves. We've had countless countless suffering lives, done countless things to calm countless beings. I mean, like, you know, but there's nothing we can't purify. There's nothing set in stone. Understand, Zoe? Cool, thank you. Time to go home, isn't it? Look, 20.
Thank you.
Hello,
very quick question.
Yeah.
So I can understand more easily like the cause and effect in this life or my families and generations, even the nation impact your destiny, right?
I think I really need you to ask me that again. I missed a bit.
Sorry. So I understand more easily. I understand more easily the cause and effect in this life, and even my generation, my family generations, how they impact my life or even the nation, like Red Revolution back in China.
So how that's a good point. Yeah. So tell me though, how do you mean your family? How does that? What do you mean? Give me an example. What do you mean by that?
Example meaning, if my parents are very paranoid people, and then when I grow up besides them, I might become a paranoid person. Or if it's a very tough environment, they're very feisty, then I might become like a personality like that.
Yeah, and of course that is that's the view of the materialist world, isn't it?
Yeah.
That we are produced by our parents. And there's no argument there. We can see that what our parents do hugely influences us. But the Buddhist point is the main, like I said before, the main cause of what you do, the choices you make, even the fact that you went to those parents is your own past karma. Your karma drove you to those parents. Your karma drove you to the multimillionaire kind parents. Your karma drove you to the mean, ugly, ungenerous parents. Whatever the parents we get, they are that. But the cause is even before that we created the cause to have those parents.
Thank you. I understood what you were explaining earlier, and I totally agree. I guess my understanding is, how do we know for sure when, like Dalai Lama says that he's not sure if there's a God, and then we are not talking about the creator.
Of course he knows there's no. He's a Buddha, okay? He's said to be a Buddha, but he won't confess to it. He tries to act ordinary, you know. So, but if he is a Buddha, his view is there's no creator because he's, you know. But what's the question though?
The question is, how are we so sure the reincarnation happens?
Good question. Good, sweetheart. Perfect question. Perfect question. Okay. So I'm Einstein, okay? And you've never heard of mathematics, you've never heard of physics. And I'm just telling you that E equals mc squared. And your question is to me, well, how can I prove it's true, Mr. Einstein? Well, what do you think you have to do to prove that I'm true when I tell you that E equals mc squared? What do you have to do to prove it? It's not a mystical question. It's not a tricky question. What would you have to do? Take your mic. Take the mic. What would you have to do?
You have to have scientific research and evidence.
Even keep it more simple. I would present you my findings, and then I would present you my methodology, wouldn't I? So if that brought me to the conclusion of E equals mc squared, clearly you follow the steps that I took, and you'll either prove I'm right or I'm wrong. The same with Buddha, darling. There is not a fraction of difference. So you take it as your hypothesis, you start the path, you act according, I mean, I haven't proven karma yet, but I've taken it, I've chosen to take it as my working hypothesis, so I'm going along the path. And as we go, as the Dalai Lama says, as you go along, ticking the boxes, you prove this, you prove that, then at some point when you can prove that Buddha or Einstein is wrong, you reject them and say, thank you very much, goodbye. So the onus is on you to practice and to find out if it is true or not, but you can't just get it overnight. It take a while to prove that equals mc squared. But our problem in the West, when it comes to science, it's been proven. Well, by whom? By you? No. So for you, it's only a hypothesis until you prove it. But we think because someone else has proven it, oh, it's science. That's just lazy. Do you understand?
I understand. Thank you so
you've got to
much.
look at it carefully. And the other point, wait, I haven't finished. Go back. I find this point very helpful. If any body of knowledge, and I don't, so spiritual path, we often don't think of it as a body of knowledge. We think it's a bunch of weird, wacky ideas that come and go, you know. But if there is a valid body of knowledge, whether it's called acupuncture, Buddhism, science, whatever you want to call it, if it is valid, this is the point, if it is valid body of knowledge, first it has to be coherent theoretically. Do you understand? So I think you could learn the theories of acupuncture and pass the exams and even teach someone else without having put a single needle in. It doesn't mean you're a good acupuncturist, but you've got the theory clear. Because if acupuncture is valid, it has to have a coherent theory. Are we communicating? Yes. Good. It's like that. So it's up to you, sweetheart. So you take it as your hypothesis, which means let's look at it as if it were so. Don't just swallow it whole or reject it, but take it as a hypothesis. The best way to put it. That's how all scientists think. Do you understand? I'm happy to prove Buddha wrong, but so far I'm enjoying his company. Do you understand? Okay.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Good, darling. It's time to go home at 8:30. Unless there are some burning questions. Yes, talk. Jenna, what's your question? Have to do purification next time. What, darling?
That's kind of what I
You
was
want
hoping.
purification?
I think it would be
Well, I'll
useful.
do a summary of purification, okay. The 4 R's. Or as we say in Boston and Australia, the 4 R's. Okay. First, regret. Second, reliance. Third, the remedy. Fourth, resolve. It's very simple psychologically. I'll go real short. Regret is not guilt. Not guilt. We love to have guilt. I did this and I did that and I did this and I'm a bad person. It's rubbish. It is not true. As the Catholics say, I love it, don't criticize the sinner, criticize the sin. So the negative action. I did kill my baby. I did do this. I did do that. I did kick my dog. I did cheat on my boyfriend. Fact. Own it. And you know why, Robina? You know why I so regret? Why do I regret that? This is the point. Why do I regret doing that? Because I've just programmed my mind with rubbish. I don't want to get killed, lied to, cheated on, stolen from. It's like self-compassion. Regret is like self-compassion, but you've got to acknowledge you did it. We all know if you can't even acknowledge your faults, you're in big trouble. So it's a powerful first step. We have to have courage to do that instead of always blaming or trying to wriggle out of it. Or it's not my fault, or, you know, or to blame somebody else, you know. I did do it. And I regret this, Robina, because I'm sick of suffering. Then I think, well, whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor? That's the second step, reliance. So here, the Buddha's our doctor. That's our good way of saying our relationship with the Buddha. He's not our creator. So you're delighted you got a Buddha. We do a particular practice where you visualize the Buddha above your head. But the second part, it's a bit curious to call it reliance, but now you have compassion for those you've harmed. And the way the Tibetans say it is, you rely upon sentient beings insofar as you can't have compassion for anybody if you never meet a person who's suffering, who's not suffering. If you never meet suffering, how can you have compassion? So in that sense, you need to meet suffering people. So here you have, first is one, compassion for yourself, regret. You know, I'm sick of this suffering. What am I going to do to fix it? I turn to the Buddha. I get his methods. Now I'm going to have compassion for those I've harmed. I have compassion for that sentient being who came to my womb. I have compassion for the nurses and doctors who had to kill the baby for me. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm just using simple words, okay? I have compassion for people I've harmed. For sure, they don't want to suffer either. But if you're brave enough, you can also have compassion for those who've harmed you. As Geshe Sopa says, bodhisattvas need their enemies. They're the best object of compassion. Why? Because they're going to suffer in the future for what they have done to me, by harming me. That's a powerful one. I always give the example of when in New York in 2003, Richard Gere, invited His Holiness, and he invited 20 former prisoners, all of who'd done some kind of meditation in prison, and a couple of people like me who work with people in prison. So he had all of them talking to each other. It was one, they met His Holiness. It was a wonderful time. But he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns, for whom karma is completely in the bones of their being. Like, it's been in Asia for 3,000 years. You've got to remember this. It's just natural for them, you know? And they've been brought up with it since they're born. It's their practice. So they talked about how they've been imprisoned, sexually abused and tortured for a couple of years. There were tears, but they didn't have anger because they have the view of karma. Anger says, how dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. They don't have that view. It's very shocking to hear that. They have the view of karma. They know why it happened. But then eventually, as they said, they had to work with it. They were struggling. It must have been very difficult for them. But at the end, one of them was in tears, and she said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past and because they will suffer in the future. That was very powerful, I thought. So that's compassion. The third one, the remedy, we do a little meditation. We do this particular mantra and we visualize, use your mind to imagine purifying and reciting a very powerful mantra. I mean, as Lama Yeshe says, we create negativity with our mind. And so we purify it by creating positivity with our mind. It's a very organic process, So and we do the purification. We visualize Buddha. He doesn't purify us. We even visualize him sending nectar, purifying. It's our mind doing it. We purify ourselves. And then fourth step, you vow not to do it again. You resolve to change. That's the essence of it. And there's no karma you can't change. That's why my friends in prison love the purification practice. So it's very optimistic psychologically, And and there's ways of doing it very wholly with your bells and everything. I don't like doing it like I do it very simply in my own words, talking to myself, being my own friend, Because we have such guilt and shame and I'm hopeless and I'm no good and such fear. It's such a powerful practice psychologically. And then you can change your experiences. For example, I was just, the first, and each of these four, there's a lot of information here, I know that, but never mind. If you want, okay, I've got all this written down somewhere. I can send you the PDFs if you like. It's up to you if you want them. You're going to have to ask somebody here or something, whatever, but it's all there. What was I saying? Okay, so each of these four steps also purifies each of the four ways that karma ripens. So let's say someone at work is mean to you, and it's a really common experience. Your colleague is jealous, they badmouth you, they tell you did something wrong, your boss doesn't like you, and it's so painful. Or someone in your family, and you just wish they'd changed their mind. You can't believe they're thinking this. You did nothing wrong. What's a part of past? That's called the experience similar to the cause of past lying or past whatever it is, from 27 lives ago. So when you do your purification, the first step is you regret. And I regret from the depths of my heart whatever I must have done to them in a past life that is now manifesting as them not believing me. Well, don't be surprised it changes next week. You can change what appears in front of you. Everything is our karmic appearance, as Mama Zopa says. It's very dynamic. We've got to really think of it like that. We just see everything as set in stone, It's not like that. It's our karmic appearance. And we can use it dynamically and use it as part of your practice and do the purification. Life can really change. It's stuff out there as well. That's the point. Not just imagine your own mind. The world out there can change as well. Are we communicating? Yeah. That'll do for now. All right, that'll do. We're finished. When am I coming back? There's one more week, isn't there? July 18. Oh. I'll be here, yeah, I promise I'll come. What's the topic? What does it say? Compassion, oh yeah, compassion. Okay. We haven't talked about emptiness yet. We've got to talk about emptiness too. Then I'll be gone August and September, but I'll be back after that. Okay. Okay, people. So we just delight this hour and a half, as many thoughts as there've been, is as much programming as we've done, as much kind of digging the grooves in our mind, sowing the seeds, if you like. So we delight in this and we think we're going to continue to nourish this, continue to practice the best of our ability to develop our marvelous potential so we can be a benefit to ourselves and to others. And may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. Jang chub sem chog rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyuchig ke panyam pa me payang gong ne gondu prabasho. May His Holiness Dalai Lama live long. May Lama Zopa Rinpoche come back quickly. May we all live long. If you're going to be virtuous and useful, the world needs good people, so live a long life, okay? That's all. Thank you, darlings.
Thank you.